I'm telling you, it's a misunderstanding.
I just ain't very signed you.
We just need to see some identification.
Oakwood Estates prided itself on three things: pristine lawns, identical mailboxes, and an HOA board that believed it was more powerful than the federal government. New residents were greeted with glossy pamphlets detailing bylaws thicker than most state constitutions, and God help anyone who left their trash cannot past 6:01 p.m. And then there was Drew Kramer. Drew was not on the HOA board, but he was its self-appointed security. A former night shift mall cop who never fully recovered from being fired for excessive taser use, he reinvented himself as the community's guardian. He had no actual authority, but he had a golf cart retrofitted with police-style lights, a neon vest that read security officer in block letters, and a walkie-talkie he used even when nobody was on the other end. The board tolerated him because he frightened solicitors and took his job with the kind of manic zeal that meant fewer complaints landed on their desks. On a muggy Thursday evening, Drew spotted something unusual: a U-Haul pulling up to 118 Willow Bend Lane. He squinted from his post near the clubhouse, lifting his binoculars as if he were monitoring an international border instead of a cul-de-sac. The truck hissed to a stop, and a woman stepped out. Mid-30s, athletic build, sharp eyes, carrying herself like someone who didn't waste movements. She wore a plain t-shirt, jeans, and had her hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun. To Drew, she looked suspicious immediately. Not because of what she was doing, unloading a couch from the truck, but because she didn't wave at him. Every new resident was supposed to wave. He grabbed his radio. "Base, this is Unit 1. We've got an unidentified female at 118 Willow Bend. Possible violation in progress." There was no base. The HOA clubhouse was empty at this hour, but Drew liked the sound of his own tactical jargon. The woman, Elena Torres, ignored him as she moved boxes with quiet efficiency. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't looking around nervously. To Drew, that meant she was hiding something. He rolled his golf cart over, siren chirping, "Ma'am." He barked, stepping out with his chest puffed. "This is a secured neighborhood. Identification, please." Elena glanced at him once, eyebrow raised, then went back to hauling a box labeled kitchen. "I live here," she said flatly. "House closed yesterday." "That's so?" "Haven't seen the paperwork," Drew replied, hand resting dramatically near his belt. He didn't carry a badge, but he did carry something else, a Glock 19, holstered like he was waiting for a showdown at high noon. Elena dropped the box on the porch and faced him squarely. "Then check with your HOA. I'm not here to play games." Something about her tone prickled Drew's fragile authority. He wasn't used to pushback. Most residents muttered apologies, promised to check the bylaws, maybe baked a pie to smooth things over. But this woman didn't look scared. She looked irritated. He hated that. "Listen here," Drew said, voice tightening. "This is a deed-restricted community. That means rules. For starters, you didn't register this moving vehicle with the HOA. You've parked on the street longer than the 20-minute allowance. And," his eyes narrowed, "you didn't wave. Everyone waves." Elena let out a small laugh. It wasn't mocking exactly, but it had the sting of dismissal. "You've got to be kidding me." That's when Drew's hand twitched toward his gun. He didn't draw it yet, but the weight of it was suddenly part of the conversation. Elena noticed instantly. Her eyes flicked to his holster, then back to his face. Her muscles coiled, but her voice stayed calm. "You don't want to do that." Drew's heart pounded. In his head, he wasn't a failed mall cop anymore, he was the last line of defense against chaos. This was his moment to assert control. In one shaky motion, he pulled the Glock free and pointed it at her chest. "Hands where I can see them. You're trespassing on private property." The neighborhood was quiet except for the hum of cicadas. A couple of blinds twitched in nearby windows. Oakwood Estates loved drama almost as much as it loved uniform mulch beds. Elena froze, not out of fear, but calculation. She raised her hands slowly. Eyes locked on his. Her breathing was steady, her voice clipped. "You just made the worst mistake of your life." Drew's finger tightened on the trigger. His fantasy of being the hero mixed with adrenaline. "Don't test me, lady. I'm authorized to use force." That line was too much. Elena almost smiled. "Authorized by who? The landscaping committee?" For a fraction of a second, Drew faltered. That was all she needed. In one fluid motion, Elena shifted her weight, stepped inside his stance, and twisted his wrist. The gun clattered to the pavement. Before Drew could process, his arm was locked behind his back, his face pressed against the hood of his own golf cart. "You're under citizen's arrest," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Drew sputtered. You can't do this. I'm security." "You're a liability with a weapon," Elena snapped. "And you just aimed it at a federal agent." His blood ran cold. "You're what?" Elena leaned closer to his ear. "Special Agent Elena Torres. FBI Tactical Command. And congratulations, you just threatened the wrong neighbor." The words hit Drew harder than the hold, pinning him down. FBI? Tactical Command? His brain scrambled between panic and denial. You're bluffing." Elena released pressure just enough to flip out her wallet from her back pocket. The badge gleamed in the porch light, unmistakable. "Oh, God," Drew muttered. The neighbors, emboldened now that the gun was on the ground, peeked further out of their blinds. A couple even stepped onto porches, whispering furiously. Phones recorded. Oakwood gossip traveled faster than wildfire, and this was gasoline on the flames. Elena shoved him off the golf cart. He stumbled, clutching his wrist. "I should cuff you right now," she said. "But I'm new here. And I don't feel like spending my first night buried in paperwork." Drew opened his mouth, but no sound came out. She kicked his gun toward him with the toe of her boot. "Pick it up. Holster it. Then walk away before I decide to call in backup." His hands shook as he obeyed, fumbling the Glock back into its holster. He scurried to his cart like a chastised child, muttering, "This isn't over." Elena watched him retreat down the street, neon vest glowing like a warning sign. She exhaled slowly, tension bleeding out of her shoulders. Then she turned back to the moving truck, picked up another box, and carried it inside as if nothing happened. From across the street, Mrs. Darlene Whitaker, longtime HOA board member and self-declared neighborhood historian, was already dialing the board president. Her voice was shrill with excitement. "You won't believe what just happened at 118 Willow Bend. Drew pulled a gun. And the new woman says she's FBI. This neighborhood is about to be on fire." She wasn't wrong, because in Oakwood Estates, scandals didn't fade quietly. They grew, mutated, and spread until they consumed everyone, and this scandal had just begun. The next morning, Oakwood Estates pulsed with gossip. In a community where the most exciting news usually involved mulch deliveries or whose azaleas were slightly over the height limit, last night's standoff between Drew and the mysterious new neighbor had hit like a thunderclap. By sunrise, everyone from Maple Loop to Sycamore Drive had heard a version of the story. In some retellings, Drew had heroically thwarted a terrorist attack. In others, he had wet himself after being disarmed by a woman half his size. The only constant detail was that Elena Torres had revealed herself as FBI, which both thrilled and terrified the HOA board. The board convened an emergency meeting in the clubhouse. Its members sat around the polished mahogany table like generals planning for war, except their battlefield was a cul-de-sac and their soldiers wielded citation slips. At the head sat President Harold Greeley, a man who considered himself the George Washington of homeowner governance. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a crisis. Our so-called security officer brandished a firearm at a federal agent. A federal agent now living in our community." Gasps and whispers rippled. Darlene Whitaker clutched her pearls. "I told you Drew was too zealous. I said it after he arrested those Girl Scouts for loitering." Treasurer Vince Meyer tapped his calculator nervously. "If she files a lawsuit, our reserve fund will be annihilated. We barely have enough for the pool replastering as it is." Harold raised a hand. "We need to manage this delicately. If word spreads beyond the community, property values will plummet. Nobody wants to buy into a subdivision where the neighborhood watch draws down on FBI agents." Darlene leaned forward. "So what do we do? Apologize? Offer her a welcome basket? What if she starts investigating us?" The room fell silent. That possibility hung in the air like a thundercloud. Everyone in Oakwood knew the HOA finances were creative. Landscaping invoices padded, kickbacks from contractors quietly accepted, reserve funds shuffled into pet projects. It was suburban corruption at its pettiest, but if an FBI agent turned her gaze on them, petty could quickly become criminal. Harold steepled his fingers. We'll invite her to the next board meeting. Make her feel included. Show her there's nothing to worry about. If she thinks we're cooperative, she won't dig deeper. Darlene sniffed. And what about Drew? All eyes turned to the empty chair at the end of the table. Drew had not been invited. After last night, even Harold wasn't reckless enough to put him in front of the board. He's on probation, Harold said vaguely. We'll handle him separately. At that very moment, Drew was in his garage polishing his Glock like a man caressing a wounded ego. His wrist ached from where Elena had twisted it, but what burned more was humiliation. Him, Oakwood's guardian, defender of order, manhandled like a rookie. She had made him look weak, and weakness was unacceptable. He paced, muttering. FBI or not, she doesn't belong here. This is my neighborhood. My jurisdiction. He convinced himself the board was too soft to deal with her properly. If they wouldn't act, he would. Across the street, Elena sat in her half-unpacked living room, sipping black coffee. She had already filed an internal report with the Bureau. Technically, she could have pressed charges. A civilian drawing a weapon on a federal agent was no small matter. But she also knew when to conserve her ammunition. There was more to this neighborhood than bad landscaping rules and puffed-up volunteers. She had sensed it the moment Drew said he was authorized. Authorized by who? Not the board. Not legally. Someone was giving him latitude, or at least turning a blind eye. She'd seen this pattern before in small-town sheriffs, campus cops, and corrupt security outfits. It always smelled the same: mismanagement, cover-ups, and a belief that authority was a toy rather than a responsibility. Her phone buzzed. A message from her partner back in D.C. You settling in okay? She smirked. Define okay. Already disarmed a wannabe cop with a gun. After a pause came the reply, that's you, all right? Keep your head down, Torres. Remember, this is supposed to be your quiet assignment. She sighed. Quiet never lasted long around her. That evening, as required by HOA bylaws, Elena attended her first community orientation. Held in the clubhouse, it was part pep rally, part indoctrination. New residents were given binders thicker than law textbooks, covering topics like approved mailbox paint colors and holiday decoration time limits. Harold Greeley himself led the meeting. When Elena walked in, every head turned. Whispering surged. Harold's smile twitched at the edges, but he kept it plastered on. Ah, Agent Torres. He boomed, deliberately loud so everyone heard the title. We're so delighted to welcome you to Oakwood Estates. Elena arched a brow. She hadn't told him her title. Which meant gossip had traveled straight to the board. Good. Let them sweat. Harold gestured to a chair at the front. Please, join us. We were just discussing the importance of unity in maintaining property values. Elena sat, her posture controlled but alert. Harold rambled on about community harmony, but she studied the room. Board members exchanged nervous glances. Darlene fiddled with her notes. Vince avoided her gaze entirely. They weren't just rattled, they were worried. When Harold finished, Elena raised her hand. Quick question, she said evenly. Your security officer, Drew Kramer. Is he officially sanctioned by this board? The room stiffened. Harold chuckled. Oh, Drew. Enthusiastic fellow, isn't he? He's more of a volunteer, really. We appreciate his vigilance. Elena's expression didn't change. Do your volunteers usually carry firearms? Silence. A cough in the back. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Well, Oakwood values safety. And Drew is committed. Committed enough to point a loaded gun at me, Elena said, her voice slicing through the room. A ripple of gasps. Harold's composure cracked for just a second before he forced another smile. An unfortunate misunderstanding. We'll ensure it doesn't happen again. Elena leaned back, crossing her arms. See that you do. Because next time, it won't end with a warning. Darlene squeaked, she's threatening us. Elena turned her gaze on her, sharp as glass. No. I'm promising you accountability. Something this board seems unfamiliar with. Murmurs erupted. Some residents nodded approvingly, others looked scandalized. Harold banged his gavel, though nobody remembered appointing him judge. Order! Order! Elena stood. I'll let you get back to your binders. I've got boxes to unpack. But one more thing, if Drew so much as looks at me wrong again, I'll have him in federal custody by sundown. She walked out, leaving the board sweating in her wake. As the door closed, Darlene hissed, she's dangerous. Harold rubbed his temples. She's a problem. But a problem we can't confront directly. Not yet. Meanwhile, Drew sat in his golf cart outside the clubhouse, eavesdropping through the cracked door. His humiliation twisted into rage. The FBI agent had embarrassed him once. Now she was turning the board against him. No. He wouldn't let her. As Elena crossed the parking lot, Drew started his cart and tailed her at a distance, headlights off. She didn't look back, but she knew he was there. Years of tactical training made her skin prickle when she was being followed. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Let him think he was invisible. Sometimes the best way to deal with a threat was to let it expose itself fully before you cut it off. Back in her house, Elena locked the door and pulled out her laptop. She wasn't supposed to run background checks on neighbors without cause, but she had plenty of cause now. A quick search on Drew Kramer's record revealed the predictable: terminated from mall security for excessive force, restraining order filed years ago by an ex-girlfriend, multiple complaints dismissed as overzealous but well-meaning. Typical. But then she found something else. A payment record. Large, regular deposits into his account from an LLC tied to the Oakwood Estates Maintenance Fund. Far more than a volunteer should receive. Her eyes narrowed. So Drew wasn't just tolerated by the board. He was on their payroll. And that meant his little stunt with the gun wasn't just a rogue act. It was a liability for everyone tied to him. Elena closed the laptop and sat back. She had moved here for peace and quiet, a chance to live in suburbia without the constant chaos of her job. Instead, she'd found a powder keg of corruption wrapped in a picket fence. Outside, Drew sat in his cart, muttering to himself, watching her window glow. You think you're tough, he whispered. But this is my neighborhood. And nobody takes it from me. He gripped his Glock and imagined the moment he'd reclaim his dignity. Elena, staring out at the same night, thought something very different. This neighborhood has no idea what kind of storm is coming. Elena knew better than to confront the HOA board directly. Corruption at this scale was like mold under wallpaper, scraped too quickly and it spread. She needed proof. Over the next week, she blended into the neighborhood. To the casual observer, she was just another homeowner trimming hedges and jogging in the mornings. In reality, she was running surveillance. Her equipment was subtle: a pair of glasses with a recording lens, a discreet mic, a laptop with bureau-level encryption. She cataloged every board meeting, every whispered conversation, every time Drew Kramer lurked too close to her property line. What emerged was a pattern. HOA funds earmarked for landscaping were funneled into shell companies. The president's cousin won every maintenance contract despite living 3 states away. And Drew was paid not as a guard but as consultant services, which explained the regular cash infusions that kept him armed and loyal. But the corruption was small potatoes compared to what she discovered on a late Friday night. The clubhouse lights were on after hours. She slipped closer, staying low behind hedges. Through the window she saw Harold Greeley and Vince Meyer hunched over documents. Drew stood guard at the door, gun visible on his hip. If Torres digs any deeper, she'll find the diversion accounts, Vince hissed. Harold scowled. Then we cut her off before she does. Drew smirked. Leave it to me. I've got ways to make people comply. Elena's pulse quickened. She had them. The conversation was enough to justify an official probe. But when she leaned closer for better audio, her foot snapped a twig. Drew's head whipped around.